Now in our 25th year, a quarter of a century of service to the worldwide amateur radio community, we are This Week in Amateur Radio, your all-amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. This is edition, number 1334, with a release and air date of Saturday, September 21, 2024. Please take the program to your air, following the cue tone.
On the air around the world and streaming on the internet since 1993, serving the amateur radio community with weekly, reliable, amateur radio news and special features, we are This Week in Amateur Radio. We are the worldwide premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the stories for release around the earth as we come to air with edition number 1334 of This Week in Amateur Radio. ICOM V-82 radios exploded in Lebanon following a day of pager explosions. ICOM releases a statement. We will have it for you. The AM radio in every vehicle bill passes a House floor vote. The Radio Society of Great Britain announces the end to paper amateur radio exams. The ARRL announces a new member benefit as it sets up a partnership with Grouper. NASA is tasked with developing a time standard for the Moon and other exploration initiatives. RRL section managers gather at League headquarters for active training. This week's National Preparedness Month topic will take a look at your station's readiness. The Radio Club of America announces its 2024 award recipients and fellows. The oldest, currently active global positioning satellite is now 13 years old. We will take a look at the ongoing proposal to privatize the 900 MHz band. The FCC will now allow asymmetrical sidebands on FM broadcast signals. And, the next time you find yourself stargazing, we have something unique for you to locate in the night sky. We will have all the details in this week's report. These headline stories will come to you in a moment, along with this week's special features. We'll visit with Bruce Page, KK5DO, and get an update from AMSAT and what's new with all those amateur satellites in orbit. Australia's own Anno Benchop, VK6FLAB, and Foundations of Amateur Radio will take a look at the history of amateur radio from an Australian perspective. Our own amateur radio historian, Will Rogers, K5WLR, will be here with another edition of A Century of Amateur Radio. This week, Hiram Percy Maxim's main goal was to establish reliable relaying of messages across the entire country. Will takes us back to the early days of amateur radio in a segment he entitled Trunk Lines. We will stop by and visit with Bill Saliers, AJ8B in the DX Corner, with all the latest news on DXpeditions, DX, radio sport contests, and more. That's all straight ahead as North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, takes to the air, right now. Reporting from our headquarters studio just outside Albany, New York, where summer has been extended well into September this year, this is W2XBS.
And reporting this week from our news bureau in Cortlandville, New York, I'm Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
And reporting from our news bureau just outside Albany, New York, where the cricket population has exploded and it's driving me nuts. I'm Rich Lawrence, KB2MOB.
And reporting from our news bureau in Salem, Ohio, this is Denny Haight, NZ8D.
And reporting from our news bureau in Rochester, New York, along the southern shore of Lake Ontario, I'm Dave Wilson, WA2HOY.
And reporting from our news bureau in Knoxville, Tennessee, in the shadow of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, I'm Josh Marler, AA4WX.
And reporting from our Troy, New York News Bureau, where all's quiet before the fall, I'm Eric, KD2RJX.
And reporting from our amateur radio outpost in the western Catskill Mountains of upstate New York, where the leaves continue to fall, I'm Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
And reporting from our news bureau in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where we are making the turn into autumn, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR.
And now, with this week's lead story, here's our own Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
Leading off our news this week, the Japanese manufacturer whose name was on handheld radios that exploded in Lebanon said Thursday that it had discontinued the device a decade ago and was investigating what happened. The company, ICOM, a telecommunications equipment maker based in Osaka, Japan, has shipped ICV-82 receivers The models whose name is seen on the radios and photos and a video of the aftermath of Wednesday's attacks to overseas markets, including the Middle East from 2004 to October of 2014. ICOM said in a statement Thursday that it had not shipped any of the IC-V82 radios from its plant in Wakayama, Japan, in roughly a decade. But the company has long warned of what it called a surge in counterfeit IC-V82 transceivers. At least 20 people were killed and more than 450 wounded when the handheld transceivers, owned by Hezbollah members, exploded across Lebanon. It was unclear where Hezbollah purchased the devices that exploded. ICOM, founded in 1954, sells radios and other products in more than 80 countries and has about 1,000 employees. According to the company, it has supplied electronics gear to public safety organizations and the U.S. Department of Defense and Marine Corps. ICOM said it has no inventory of the IC-V82 models and has issued warnings saying that almost all IC-V82 radios available for purchase are counterfeit. ICOM said it has taken legal action against counterfeit manufacturers and has warned about the fake models since at least 2020. ICOM issued a warning in the past on how to spot counterfeits. The IC-V82 is a handheld VHF transceiver commonly used for amateur radio communications and operates primarily in the 2-meter band. Counterfeit versions of the radios are at risk of catching fire or exploding because of battery malfunctions, ICOM said. Many are labeled Made in China, according to ICOM. The company said that all of its radios are produced at factories in Japan. A day before the radio explosions, blasts from pagers killed at least 12 people and wounded over 2,700 others in Lebanon. Israel has neither confirmed nor denied any role in the explosions, but 12 current and former defense and intelligence officials briefed on the attack say the Israelis were behind it. The AR-924 pagers that exploded earlier in the week were manufactured by BAC Consulting, KFT, which is based in the Hungarian capital of Budapest. Companies that make two-way radios say the devices typically have a lifespan of about 5 to 7 years, though that can depend on their usage. Copies of these models are floating in the market, ICOM has said in warnings posted online. Authentic products have a hologram label that says ICOM and genuine, according to the company. ICOM said on Thursday that because these devices that exploded in Lebanon were not fixed with the counterfeit prevention sticker, it was not possible to confirm whether they had originated with the company. The company declined to specify how it determined that the radios did not have that label. Ray Novak, N9JA, senior sales manager for ICOM America's amateur radio division, expressed certainty that the radios in question were counterfeit. Attending a Rhode Island trade show, he told the Associated Press, "I can guarantee you they were not our products." Acknowledging the relative ease with which unauthorized radios can be duplicated, ICOM's website also includes detailed information showing how consumers are able to determine whether or not their radio is a counterfeit. ICOM said it sells products only to authorized distributors and that it upholds strict export controls based on regulations set by Japan's economy ministry. The company said it would continue to provide updates when it receives new information. At least 2 vendors on Tobo, a Chinese e-commerce marketplace, were selling on Thursday what they said were ICOM IC-V82 walkie-talkies, one for $32 apiece and the other for $34. 3 vendors were selling what was listed as the ICOM walkie-talkie on another Chinese e-commerce platform, JD.com, and quoted prices of $35, $55, and $104.
Now celebrating our 25th year keeping the amateur radio community around the world informed, you are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available worldwide as a podcast from our web at twiar.net.
419 days after the Senate version passed from committee to the floor, the AM Radio for Every Vehicle Act is now open to be voted on by the full House of Representatives. The text of H.R. 8449 was approved by the House Energy and Commerce Committee by a vote of 45-2. Led by Representatives Frank Pallone of New Jersey and Gus Bilirakis of Florida, the AM Act aims to mandate that all vehicles made or sold in the U.S. include AM radios free of charge as a safety feature. Representative Pallone said, for those who have experienced natural disasters like Superstorm Sandy, we know that AM radio is an important lifeline when other forms of mass communications go out. It's an important bill that I believe will help American safety. Congressman John James of Michigan, stating his vehement opposition to the act and saying the legislation is exactly why people hate Washington, tried to add an amendment allowing the Secretary of Transportation to review and repeal the mandate at a later time. Representative James happens to represent a district with an overwhelming auto manufacturing presence. That amendment was struck down. This progress follows a previously delayed markup session in June caused by debate over the American Privacy Rights Act, offering hope to broadcasters as time on legislative session runs short. Currently, the AM Radio for Every Vehicle Act has needed a majority of 262 co-sponsors in the House and a supermajority of 63 in the Senate. The bill's passage is critical before Congress adjourns for the year. If not passed, it will need to be reintroduced in the next session.
Beginning January 1st, the Radio Society of Great Britain will no longer offer paper-based amateur radio licensing exams, except for special educational needs. Already, 97% of all amateur license exams are conducted online remotely or within a club space. Additional costs and effort around the paper-based exams were cited as the reasons to move to an all-digital format. Here are the key dates. Paper exams continue until December 13th. November 29th is the last day to book a paper exam. Paper exams will no longer be available beginning January 1.
ARRL, the National Association for Amateur Radio, is pleased to announce a partnership with Grouper, the national leader in activity benefit administration. The collaboration between ARRL and Grouper aims to enhance the health of ARRL members by providing access to benefits that support staying active and engaged. Guided by its mission of encouraging healthy living through meaningful social connections, Grouper connects its members to benefits that cover costs associated with group activities by joining Grouper and staying connected through amateur radio. Here with more details is John Ross, KD8IDJ, who files this report from League headquarters.
A new ARRL partnership will benefit members 65 years old and older. ARRL is pleased to announce a partnership with Grouper. Grouper provides benefits to ARRL members age 65 plus for staying active in their communities, and these benefits include covering costs associated with your social activity. According to the United States Surgeon General, staying socially active in group activities has proven health benefits and is critical for older Americans who have above average risk of social isolation and depression. For ARRL members with an eligible Medicare Advantage or Medicare Supplement plan, you'll receive a $50 check from Grouper. In addition, if you continue to stay active in ARRL activities such as attending ARRL-affiliated club meetings, getting on the air with friends, going to Hamfest, or even just socializing with other members at the coffee shop, Grouper will send you a $20 social wellness incentive every 3 months. From ARRL contests to field day and radio club meetings, ARRL and amateur radio activities keep our members socially connected and promote a healthier, more fulfilling life. We know you value your community and camaraderie. Let Grouper support those values. If you have questions, contact Grouper's membership engagement team at 833-445-2400 or at info@hellogrouper.com. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
Grouper is thrilled to help support ARRL members by offering access to an activity benefit that encourages social connection, said Doug Wenners, Grouper's Chief Executive Officer. This partnership is a natural fit because both organizations understand that social connection builds relationships, encourages involvement, and enhances our communities. Grouper supports ARRL members who are eligible for the activity benefit by helping to offset membership dues and the participation costs associated with their amateur radio activities. Members are then encouraged to remain active so they can receive ongoing activity benefits. ARRL is excited to partner with Grouper to expand opportunities for connection and learning within our community, said ARRL Membership Manager Mark Spardello, W1NJ. This partnership allows us to connect more people who share a passion for amateur radio through ARRL membership and ARRL-affiliated clubs. We'll also reach other Grouper members, inviting them to explore radio communications through ARRL and our engaged community of members. To find out if you qualify for the activity benefit administered by Grouper and to join the social fitness movement, visit https://hellogrouper.com/ARRL. That is hellogrouper.com/ARRL.
NASA will coordinate the U.S. government stakeholders, partners, and international standards organizations to establish a coordinated lunar time following a policy directive from the White House in April. The agency's Space Communication and Navigation Program, or SCAN, is leading in the effort on creating a coordinated time which will enable a future lunar ecosystem that could be scalable to other locations in our solar system. The lunar time will be determined by a weighted average of atomic clocks at the moon, similar to how scientists calculate Earth's globally recognized coordinated universal time. Exactly where at the moon is still to be determined, since current analysis indicates that atomic clocks placed at the moon's surface will appear to tick faster by microseconds per day. A microsecond is 1/millionth of a second. NASA and its partners are currently researching which mathematical models will be best for establishing a lunar time. To put these numbers into perspective, a hummingbird's wings flap at about 50 times per second. Each flap is about 20,000 microseconds. So, while 56 microseconds may seem minuscule when discussing distance in space, tiny bits of time add up. For something traveling at the speed of light, 56 microseconds is enough time to travel the distance of approximately 168 football fields, said Cheryl Gramling, lead on lunar position, navigation, timing, and standards at NASA headquarters in Washington. If someone is orbiting the moon, an observer on Earth who isn't compensating for the effects of relativity over a day would think that the orbiting astronaut is approximately 168 football fields away from where the astronaut really is. As the agency's Artemis campaign prepares to establish a sustained presence on and around the moon, NASA's SCAN team will establish a time standard at the moon to ensure the critical time difference does not affect the safety of future explorers. The approach to time systems will also be scalable for Mars and other celestial bodies throughout our solar system, enabling long-duration exploration. As the commercial space industry grows and more nations are active at the moon, there is a greater need for time standardization. A shared definition of time is an important part of safe, resilient, and sustainable operations, said Dr. Ben Ashman, navigation lead for lunar relay development, part of NASA's SCAN program. NASA's SCAN program serves as the office for the agency's space communications, operations, and navigation. More than 100 NASA and non-NASA missions rely on SCAN's two networks, the Near Space Network and the Deep Space Network, to support astronauts aboard the International Space Station and future Artemis missions, to monitor Earth's weather and the effects of climate change, and to support lunar exploration and uncover the solar system and beyond.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
The ARRL field organization is divided geographically into 71 sections. A key volunteer that members in each section elect is the section manager. These ARRL member volunteers take a critical role in being the front line of the organization to members. On Saturday, September 14th, 2024, 13 ARRL section managers gathered at ARRL headquarters in Newington, Connecticut for training. ARRL staff members gave them a detailed overview of what the association does on a daily basis and how the resources from headquarters can serve members out in the sections. ARRL Field Services Manager, like Mike Walters, WAZY, serves as the point of contact for section managers. These folks have taken on a tremendous responsibility to serve ARRL members and ham radio in general. They're the ones who facilitate the work of the ARRL in the field, and we want to make sure they have every tool available to them, said Walters. After the training, the group activated Maximum Memorial Station W1AW.
As ARRL continues the September series on National Preparedness Month, we turn to a critical element for radio amateurs and especially radio amateur emergency service volunteers. Here with this week's preparedness details is John Ross, KD8IDJ.
Many hams have a home station from which we operate on a regular basis. Is your station set up to operate or have the ability to operate off-grid or on alternate power sources? There are many ways to set this up and to run on battery power, and could even be done temporarily if you don't have a permanent battery backup situation. ARRL Director of Emergency Management Josh Johnson, KE5MHV, says it is easier than ever now to have a backup. With the new batteries out there and solar technology both improving in quality and decreasing in price, building a resilient station is no longer difficult or expensive, he said. Johnson encourages ham radio operators to think about powering more than just one radio or an alternate power source. Do you have lights that could run off the battery source? Do you have an alternate power source for your computer? What about your internet connection? Is there a backup for it, he asked. Johnson says backup generators are great, but sometimes they only feed certain circuits in your home. Amateurs should test their ham radio to ensure that it is powered by the generator. If the whole house system does not power the station, a portable generator could be an option. The key to the test is the system under the blue sky conditions to ensure that it works. Check for RF noise and potential power drop. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
Having backup antennas is also crucial, especially for dealing with storms. It may be useful to have alternative antennas on hand, especially for HF and VHF, said Johnston.
The Electronic Frontier Foundation, a nonprofit group in the U.S. advocating for freedom in the use of technology, has added its voice to the chorus urging the FCC to keep the 900 MHz band accessible to amateur radio operators, industrial, scientific, and medical devices, and unlicensed consumer electronics. Those frequencies are being eyed by NextNav, a geolocation technology company which made a request earlier this year to the FCC for exclusive rights to the part of the spectrum between 902 and 928 MHz. The private company's stated intent has been to have these frequencies privatized for use by 5G cellular communications and a positioning, navigating, and timing network to be used in the U.S. as a backup for GPS navigation. The ARRL and a number of other amateur organizations have already spoken out, urging the FCC to turn the proposal down. In its response to the FCC, the ARRL argued that the move would pose a risk to public service because it would edge ham radio operators out of a part of the spectrum that is well used. The period for comments to the FCC on this proposal closed on Friday, September 20th.
The Australian Communications and Media Authority has issued a new amateur radio license fee structure. The ACMA said in a news release that effective September 1st, we will introduce new fees for the following call sign activities. The new amateur radio fees are reassigning a special event call sign, $34, VK0 and VK9 call sign, $34, contest call sign, $15, transferring a call sign to another amateur operator, $15. The amateur radio call sign policy and website has been updated to reflect these new changes. Information about how we set fees is in the Fees for Service Cost Recovery Implementation Statement. Special event, contest, VK0, or VK9 call signs have a designated assignment period of 12 months. We will contact you before the expiry to remind you to apply to have the call sign reassigned to you. If a reassignment application is not made before the expiry date, the call sign will no longer be assigned to you and will be made available on the call sign register. Amateur operators with 2-letter, 3-letter, and F-Series call signs should reconfirm ongoing use of their call sign every 5 years. There is no cost for amateur operators to reconfirm ongoing use of their 2-letter, 3-letter, or F-Series call signs. We encourage amateur operators to log into ACMA Assist link to reconfirm their call sign or apply to transfer or reassign call signs. Following feedback, we have made a minor change to the Amateur Radio Operating Procedures link to clarify that communications established with another station is also referred to as a series of transmissions.
The average age of a global positioning satellite is now 13 years, with half of them exceeding their designed lifespan. The USA 132 satellite broke the record for the oldest GPS satellite in history, having completed 27 plus years in operation. While the record is an indicator of the reliability and robust engineering of the GPS satellites, it also means that the service still relies on hardware built in the 1990s. 31 GPS satellites are in operation today, down from 36 in 2016. The Global Positioning System was primarily designed for military purposes, but was opened up to wide-scale civilian use in 1983. Since then, GPS has grown into one of the most widely used services in the world, with billions of people using GPS on a daily basis today. The overall GPS network still works well, but the aging satellites, coupled with the delays in the launch schedule for new satellites, threaten its competitive edge as international rivals begin into service their own GNSS system and private companies develop alternatives.
After 47 years, it's little wonder that the hydrazine-powered thrusters of the Voyager 1 used to orient the spacecraft in such a way that its 12-foot diameter antenna always points back toward the Earth are getting somewhat clogged up. As a result, the team has now switched back to the thrusters which they originally retired back in 2018. The Voyager spacecraft each have 3 sets of thrusters. 2 sets were originally intended for attitude propulsion and 1 for trajectory correction maneuvers, but since leaving the solar system many years ago, Voyager 1's navigational needs have become more basic, allowing all 3 sets to be used effectively interchangeably. The first set was used until 2002, when clogging of the fuel tubes was detected with silicon dioxide from an aging rubber diaphragm in the fuel tank. The second set of attitude propulsion thrusters was subsequently used until 2018, until clogging caused the team to switch to the third and final set. It is this last set that is now more clogged than the second set, with the fuel tube opening reduced from about 0.25 millimeters to 0.035 millimeters. Unlike a few decades ago, the spacecraft is much colder due to energy-conserving methods, complicating the switching of thruster sets. Switching on a cold thruster set could damage it, so it had to be warmed up first with its thruster heaters. The conundrum was where to temporarily borrow power from, as turning off one of the science instruments might be enough to not have it come back online. Ultimately, a main heater was turned off for an hour, allowing the thruster swap to take place and allowing Voyager 1 to breathe a bit more freely for now. Compared to the recent scare involving Voyager 1, where we thought that its computer systems might have died, this matter probably feels more routine to the team in charge. But with a spacecraft that's the furthest removed man-made spacecraft in outer space, nothing is ever truly routine.
You are listening to North America's premier news and information service for the amateur radio hobbyist. We are This Week in Amateur Radio.
Coming up, This Week in Amateur Radio is presenting another chapter of A Century of Amateur Radio, hams, organizations, events, inventions, from the mind of Chris Cordella, W2PA, and his editing team. Each episode will bring a different aspect of early amateur radio history. Coming up here on This Week in Amateur Radio.
Hello and welcome to the DX Corner for your weekly dose of DX. I'm Bill, AJ8B. I received an email from Bob, K8AAC, with the question, "You mentioned tail ending in one of your podcasts. What does that mean? Is it a skill that I should learn?" Well, that's a great question, Bob. Imagine that you are a reporter at a press conference and you want to have the person of interest call on you next. The normal approach is to try to shout louder than the reporters next to you, hoping that the person will hear you and then select you. You really have a 1 in X chance of getting picked next. However, what if you were to just throw your name out there right after the previous question was answered, but before the interviewee says, "Next question, please"? Chances are you will be heard. You could call this tail ending. Using this technique with sideband or CW can achieve the same successful results. For example, let's say that P5DX is working a pileup, and it would be a huge pileup. He has been sending the following in after each QSO. So here's an example. P5DX sends AJ8B 599. AJ8B responds with 599, thank you and good luck. P5DX then sends up 10 to 20. All callers call at once, and there's going to be thousands of them. However, tail ending might be used in this scenario. The P5 sends AJ8B 599. AJ8B sends thank you and good luck. Now, at the very end of good luck, WAGEX throws in GEX. The P5DX, who was about to tell everybody up 10 to 20, heard the GEX and says, "The GEX station, go ahead." This can be a very effective strategy and frankly is used quite often. However, you need to pay attention to 3 things. Number 1, if the DX station has said full calls only, then you really need to pass along your full call even if you're tail ending. Number 2, listen to the pileup. Some DX stations don't like tail ending and simply won't work you. They won't return the call, and you'll hear that if you're listening carefully to the pileup. And number 3, it does take practice. You can't just throw your name out there and hope somebody calls you. You got to time it just right. However, it is an effective strategy at times and is just another tool to keep in your toolbox. So thanks, Bob, for that really excellent question. Often people will ask me if there's a written copy of the information that I present. There are so many call signs, dates, and URLs being discussed, you could never remember them until such time as you could write them down. I use most of the same data that you hear in the DX Corner for the weekly DX column in the Ohio Section Journal. If you just Google ARRL Ohio Section, you will find the Ohio Section website and you can subscribe to the weekly journal and get most of this information. The actual website is arrl-ohio.org. It is a free journal and you don't need to be an ARRL member to receive it. You won't get the well-rounded information that you get from the This Week in Amateur Radio podcast, but you will get the majority of the DX information that I relay here. So here's what's happening in the world of DX, and I will tell you that because sunspot numbers are strong and we're moving into the fall season with DXpeditions and contests coming up, it's very busy. This section of DX news comes from Bernie, W3UR, editor of the Daily DX, the Weekly DX, and the How's DX column in QST. If you would like a free 2-week trial of the Daily DX, your only source of real-time DX information, just drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com. During October and November, look for PZ5JT to be QRV from Suriname during the jungle training of the Royal Dutch Army and Marines. Members of the Signal Regiment will be active on sideband on 40, 20, 17, 15, and 10 meters. The ops will be on the air in their spare time using military equipment from multiple locations. Sometimes they'll be signing /M or /P. We have an update on the recent CY9C St. Paul Island DXpedition. Bill, K5DHY, reports that OQRS is now open for CY9C. If possible, please be generous with donations. This was the first CY-9 DXpedition that cost in excess of $100,000. The CY-9C team utilized 2 helicopters as well as a boat to transport gear and team members to the island. Special thanks go to Air Dolan and Breton Air Services for the helicopter support, as well as Greg Lawrence for the boat transportation. Over 4 tons of gear, materials, and supplies were transported to St. Paul Island. As of today, the total QSO count stands at 114,842. Thanks to all who were in the pileups. We experienced very interesting propagation during the DXpedition. Disturbed geomagnetic conditions were experienced for 3 to 4 days during our 10.5-day stay on the island. This reduced the number of Qs during those days. The team rotated operating shifts for the duration of the DXpedition. Overall, the weather was reasonably good during the time on the island, with strong winds and occasional rain at times. St. Paul is very exposed to the wind, but the team's new tents held up very well during the wind events. Once again, the team plans for a beautiful, double-folded 6-panel QSL card. Thanks again to all the foundation, clubs, and individuals who supported the CY-9C DXpedition. We could not have done it without your help and support. 7 threes from Murray, WA4DAN, and Glenn, W0GJ. So here's some information on VK9-X, Christmas Island, and VK9-C, Cocos Keeling Island DXpeditions. 4 Germans and 1 Australian are planning back-to-back DXpeditions to Christmas Island and then on to Cocos Keeling Islands in February and March 2025. Gunter, DL2AWG, will lead an experienced group of DXers. The first stop will be from February 18th to March 4th at the Island Divers Villa on Christmas Island. There they will go to Beachcomber Cottage on Cocos Keeling Island, where they will operate from March 4th to March 12th. Accommodations and flights have been booked and confirmed. The Christmas and Cocos DXpedition teams have valid CEPT licenses for VK9, but they are in the application process for genuine VK9 licenses, meaning that they don't have to say VK9/home call. They have requested the calls VK9XU for Christmas and VK9CU for Cocos Keeling. They will be active on CW, sideband, FT4, FT8, and RIDI on 160 through 6 meters. Plans are to have 3 stations active around the clock. Equipment will include 2 Flex 6500s, 1 FTDX10, and an IC7300, along with 3 ACOM 500s and 1 Expert 1.3K amplifier. As for antennas, they plan to have a hex beam for 20 through 6, a DX Commander vertical for 40 through 10, J-pole for 30s, a rhombic for 17 and 12, and verticals for 80 and 160 meters. QSOs will be uploaded daily to Club Log, and they may use live stream as well. QSL to Delta Lima 2, AWG, and via OQRS on Club Log. QSOs will be uploaded to LOTW 3 months after the DXpedition. The team is constructing a website for the DXpedition, and as soon as I have that information, I will pass it on. The 6 Oscar 3 Tango operators that are headed to Somalia are safe, but the DXpedition is currently in limbo. The DXpedition team has run into unforeseen delays. They arrived safely, but their equipment is still held up by the customs process in Somalia. They wrote that, quote, "While this is not an ideal situation, it is a normal part of the process and, as expected, will take a few days before everything is completed." The operators are, quote, "safe, well-fed, and in good health." Their goal is to be on the air within the next few days. Subscribers to the Daily DX and Weekly DX will receive timely email notifications. In the meantime, we send our best wishes to the 6 Oscar 3 Tango team. And of course, whatever updates I have, you'll get next week. Someone who's becoming a pen pal with me is headed to Black Ridge, Greenland, as XP2I, September 21st to 22nd, to participate in the Scandinavian Activity Contest CW. It is Henning, OZ2I. Henning has submitted some outstanding articles to the newsletters I edit, and in just other general good emails that we've exchanged back and forth. He will have an Elecraft K3S running 100 watts into a spider beam for 20, 15, and 10, and dipoles for the low bands. Activity before the contest is possible. Listen for him on 80 through 10 meter CW. QSOs will be uploaded to Clublog and LOTW. And I'll tell you, Henning is an outstanding operator, a great guy, and frankly, a very good author. So good luck to you, buddy. There are a group of Germans who are headed to the Kingdom of Eswatini, where they will use the call sign 3 Delta Alpha 0 Delta Lima, October 25th to November 9th. Plans are to have 5 stations on 160 through 10 meters, CW, sideband, and the digital modes. Equipment will include 3 ICOM 7300s and 2 ICOM 705 transceivers along with amplifiers. They will have verticals for 160 and 80, loops for 60, 40, and 30, a spider beam for 20 through 10, and another spider beam for 30 and 12 meters. They'll also have loops for 20, 15, and 10, an HP9CV for 17 and 12 meters, and a beverage antenna for receiving. They are absolutely well equipped, and they're going to knock down the pileups for 3 Delta Alpha 0 Delta Lima. So good luck, you guys. 4 hams are packing over 500 pounds of equipment in suitcases and making their final plans for a de-expedition to Vanuatu, a small island nation between Australia and Fiji. Expect to hear them on the air from October 16th through October 29th. They will be operating 2 high-power stations with a choice of 7 antennas. There is room for 1 or 2 more hams in their luxury villa located on a South Pacific beach. If you are interested, please contact Van as soon as possible, and that email address is vanharridge@gmail.com. And you can also drop me a note, thedxmentor@gmail.com. Planning for this de-expedition started in 2022 with plans to concentrate on sideband and participate in the 2024 CQ Worldwide Single Sideband Contest on October 26 and 27 as a high-power M2 designation using the call sign YJ0VV. In addition to operating as a DX station, they will have the opportunity to operate at several POTA and IOTA locations. Again, if you're interested, drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com. Following up on the September 9th story of Polish de-expeditioners SP9 FIH Janusz and SP9 CIK Lezik going to Nosy Be Island in Madagascar, Janusz says that the licenses are now in hand. They will be operating as 5 Radio 8 Whiskey Echo and 5 Radio 8 Charlie India, respectively, from October 23rd to November 6th. Activity will be on CW sideband and FT8, including Super Fox on 40 through 10 meters. They will have an IC7300 along with 2 Expert 1.3K amplifiers. They're still making final decision as to their antennas, but as of press time, they plan on having 2-element verticals on 40, 2-element verticals on 30, verticals on 20, loops on 17 and 15, 3-element beams on 12 and 10. They may be limited on space and won't erect 2-element verticals if they can't. They will be emphasizing activity on 10 and 12 meters. They will have a plane booked and they have made a down payment on the cottage. As of September 16th, 2024, the KH-8T de-expedition is now in the books with 43,064 QSOs in the log. Antennas are being taken down and suitcases packed. Flights to Honolulu late tonight and onto our home QTH in the following days. This was a great trip with new experiences had by all. All of us were motivated by the enthusiasm of the callers and the interest and support in the de-expedition. 73 from Don, N5DD/KH8T. I have to tell you, I worked them everywhere I need them, and they were terrific, so well done, Don. If you are someone who likes podcasts and or YouTube episodes, the DX Mentor has a discussion with Dave, AA6YQ, about his groundbreaking and free station control suite of software products, otherwise known as DX Lab. Check it out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Until next week, this is Bill, AJ8B, saying 7-3, and thanks to my XYL Karen for her love and support. I hope to see you in the pileups.
You're listening to America's premier amateur radio news magazine of the air. This Week in Amateur Radio.
Welcome to the 13th segment of Ham Radio History, A Century of Amateur Radio. Hams, Organizations, Events, Inventions. I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR. I want to thank Chris Cadella, W2PA, for permitting us to use his website in the preparation of these programs. So, presented here is the next of many chapters of ham radio history. Trunk lines. Clearly, Maxim's main goal was to establish reliable relaying across the entire country. He was excited by its collaborative nature. In the third and last free issue of QST, he wrote, "The cooperation of a few unknown but nevertheless kindred spirits between Portland, Maine, and Portland, Oregon, by means of which the message is handed on, adds a touch to the whole scheme and makes it almost utopian." It was the primary reason for organizing the League, whose membership had just reached 1,000 in late 1915. But a great idea alone did not lead to a practical system. The first of the blueprint items, and the only one pertaining to operating procedure, advised stations across the country to routinely announce themselves QRU, i.e. ready to receive messages, and maintain a regular schedule. Maxim then added the concept of running regular tests. Aside from exercising the system and its parts, he hoped the tests would serve to bring timid operators out of their shells and get them to announce themselves. He believed there was a pervasive case of key fright among the members, similar to what we more recently recognize as a novice's first contact fear. But Maxim observed this condition even among some experienced operators. He considered it a serious obstacle to establishing a reliable system, writing, "There are a great many amateurs who lack the nerve or whatever else it is to break in and send out a general QRU. There is something akin to standing up before the crowd and making a speech in sending a general call. Some people would rather take a thrashing rather than touch their key for the purpose. They feel that they cannot send well enough, or that they will become rattled, or that something will happen in the form of a comeback, which will disclose the awful fact that they cannot receive well. These people never entirely get over this feeling, and many of them have station equipment which, in the hands of an operator with more nerve, could do wonders. For this reason, any plan which calls for initiative on the part of all stations in a voluntary organization, such as the Relay League, is bound to be only partially effective." He further proposed establishing a network of trunk lines across the country, linking major cities, which would serve to channel messages across the country over paths known to be reliable. In the eastern part of the country, a trunk line ran south along the New England coast, Trunk Line C, branching first at Boston out to Chicago, A, and again at Philadelphia out to New Orleans, D, before continuing to the Carolinas and Florida. In the western states, 3 lines beginning in Chicago, A, St. Louis, B, and Houston, E, extended west out to Seattle, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. Then were linked together along the West Coast trunk line, F. Stations lying along these lines would collaborate in organizing themselves locally with the best stations, Maxim dubbed them star stations, emerging over time through constant testing and reporting of results to ARRL headquarters via mail. District headquarters would be established for each trunk line and would each be responsible for developing their own piece of the system. The League would thus be a national federation of local organizations, the beginnings of the nested hierarchical structure that eventually became the national traffic system. Although the trunk lines were only a suggestion, amateurs apparently latched onto the specific design Maxim had published, judging from the letters he received. Eager to establish the local headquarters for the lines and pass along responsibility for getting them organized, he suggested 3 to start with, in Chicago, San Francisco, and in the east either in Philadelphia or somewhere in New Jersey. These were chosen because they were population centers that lay either at junctions or along more than one trunk line. One prerequisite was that each HQ should be chosen for their operators' organizational skills. Another was that they would always meet their test message schedules or get a substitute. Stations that failed to be on the air at the right time were the biggest impediment to amateur radio relaying. Therefore, the line should operate only one night per week rather than attempt it more often at the cost of decreased reliability. The exact time of operation was left up to the discretion of each trunk line, but Maxim suggested that it should be late enough to both eliminate QRM from the little boys and to be after the time when most movies ended at theaters. But he also advocated operating at the same time all across the country in order to try to set new records, for example, to possibly complete a round-trip Chicago to Maine relay and acknowledgement in 15 to 20 minutes. Message and acknowledgement formats should contain the calls of all the relayers so as to be able to constantly evaluate the system and detect dead ends. Finally, he asked again for the help from the local amateur radio communities in figuring out who should be district HQs. ARRL HQ did not know enough about the individual stations to make that determination. One woman who stood out among the stations of the nascent relay network, Mrs. Emma Candler, 8NH, later 8ER of Marysville, Ohio, shared a station with her husband Charles, but was by far the more active of the two. Trained and employed as a telegraph operator at the Marconi Company, she quickly became a proficient wireless operator when she got on air in 1915. Early in her amateur career, tired of being referred to on the air as OM, she one day told another amateur that she was in fact an OW, and from then on was known as such to her friends. She became ARRL Central Division Superintendent until after the war, when a career teaching math kept her from resuming her league role. Included in this material are quotes from the following: Hiram Percy Maxim, Practical Relaying, QST, February 1916, page 19. Hiram Percy Maxim, Practical Relaying, QST, March 1916, page 45. Emma Candler, 8NH, Who's Who in Amateur Wireless, QST, October 1916, page 303. With a thank you tip of the This Week in Amateur Radio hat to W2PA, Chris Codella, for the use of his website's materials, Ham Radio History, A Century of Amateur Radio, Ham's Organizations, Events, Inventions. I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, reporting for This Week in Amateur Radio.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available as an on-demand stream from Spotify, Deezer, and wherever podcasts are available.
Many amateur radio operators around the world have an Amazon Alexa virtual assistant in their shacks. This week, Amazon announced that it is poised to unveil a significant overhaul of its Alexa virtual assistant, incorporating advanced AI capabilities to create a more personalized and conversational experience. According to reporting by Caroline O'Donovan of The Washington Post and discussed on Tech News Weekly, the new AI-powered Alexa is slated for a mid-October release. Key features of the updated Alexa include conversational AI. The new Alexa aims to be more likable and charismatic, engaging in natural conversations and remembering user preferences. Personalization. Alexa will ask questions about users and their families, using this information to tailor responses and recommendations. Enhanced shopping features. Alexa will monitor prices for items users express interest in and alert them to price drops. Unlike the current free version, the AI-powered Alexa will be a subscription product. While the new features show promise, concerns remain about privacy, especially regarding children's interactions with AI. Additionally, the launch's proximity to the U.S. election raises questions about how Amazon will handle potential misinformation risks. As Amazon prepares to roll out this major update, it remains to be seen how consumers will respond to a paid AI-enhanced Alexa and whether it can compete effectively in the rapidly evolving AI assistant market. Interestingly, when we first came across this story, top of the page the disclaimer read, AI created, human edited.
It's time for this week's satellite shorts from all over, and this week we begin with the Yaesu announcing the upcoming FTX-1F HF 6, 144, and 440 portable transceiver, presumably a replacement for the FT816-817 series. The transceiver is said to have two independent SDR receivers that provide simultaneous dual-band operation, whether in the same or in different bands. This does not necessarily mean the transceiver will operate in full duplex mode. It will provide 6 watts of power output with the included 5,600 milliamp lithium-ion battery pack, or up to 10 watts with external power. Average CW sideband operating time in the VHF-UHF bands is quoted as up to 8 hours. Sideband CW, AM, FM, and C4FM operation is available. USB ports support CAI operation, audio input and output, and TX control. The FTX-1F has not been formally released for sale in the U.S., but should be available early in 2025. Next up are details from the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, officially ending its mission of SLIM, the country's first moon lander, last week. Originally only expected to operate for a single lunar day, and then feared to be doomed after it landed in the incorrect orientation after losing an engine bell. The mission managed to survive 3 lunar nights and compete all pre-mission success criteria. SLIM SLIM is the first lunar lander to successfully perform a pinpoint landing, arriving within 10 meters of its selected landing site. And our final satellite short this week, the average age of a GPS satellite is now 13 years, with half of them exceeding their designed lifespan. The USA 132 satellite broke the record for the oldest GPS satellite in history, having completed 27-plus years in operation. While the record is an indicator of the reliability and robust engineering of the GPS satellite, it also means the service still relies on hardware built in the 1990s. 31 GPS satellites are in operation today, down from 36 in 2016. The GPS system was primarily designed for military purposes, but was opened up to wide-scale civilian use in 1983. Since then, GPS has grown into one of the most widely used services in the world, with billions of people using GPS on a daily basis. The overall GPS network still works well, but with the aging of satellites coupled with the delays in the launch schedule, threatens its competitive edge as international rivals bring into service their own GNSS system and private companies develop alternatives.
Michael D. Valentine, W8MM of Cincinnati, Ohio, passed away on Monday, September 16, 2024. He was 74. John Ross, KD8 IDJ, is here with more.
Mike and his wife of 51 years, Margaret Peg Valentine, have been the most generous individual supporters of ARRL. Valentine earned his amateur radio license as a teenager. I was first licensed as WN8MSF and WA8MSF simultaneously in the spring of my freshman year in high school in 1964. I was a combo novice and technician, as was customary in those days for technically proficient beginners. He wrote that in his biography for the Quarter Century Wireless Association. His interest in amateur radio and electronics led Valentine to enter the electrical engineering program at the University of Cincinnati, where he met Peg. And after graduation in 1973, he co-founded Cincinnati Microwave, maker of Escort radar detectors. Mike and Peg also founded Valentine Research in 1983. The company designs, manufactures, and sells electronic devices directly to users. Their flagship model, the Valentine 1 and the Valentine 1 Gen 2, brought many innovations in that space, including being the first radar detector to indicate the direction of the radar device relative to the vehicle. Valentine and his products have been profiled many times in automotive enthusiast media. Together, the Valentines shared their success generally with many organizations, including public television, higher education, the arts, and ARRL. Valentines are the single biggest individual donors in ARRL history. They are Millennium Class members of the ARRL Maximum Society. Mike served on the ARRL Second Quarter Century Campaign Committee, which coincided with ARRL Centennial 2014. The campaign, including the Valentine Challenge Fund, which matched dollar-for-dollar contributions of other donors, established an endowment to ensure ARRL's ongoing commitment to amateur radio. In 2023, ARRL awarded the Valentines the inaugural Mary Hobart K1MMH Medal of Distinction during a donor recognition event held in Dayton, Ohio. To say that the Valentines are a great philanthropist is an understatement, said ARR Director of Development Kevin Beal, KE88L, in remarks he made during the award presentation. Mike and Peg have invested significantly in supporting the future of amateur radio. They have set the example for all of our donors with their philanthropic leadership. I'm John Ross, KD8I-DJ.
In addition to his successful business pursuits and exceptional generosity to many organizations, Valentine could often be found cheering at University of Cincinnati Bearcat games, operating ham radio, and driving sports cars. The Cincinnati Enquirer has published a life story with these additional details. A visitation will be held on Tuesday, September 24th, 2024, from 9:30 a.m. until time of funeral service at 11 a.m. at the Covenant First Presbyterian Church, 717 Elm Street, Cincinnati, Ohio, 45202. The reception will immediately follow in the parish hall. Burial will be held privately at Spring Grove Cemetery. In lieu of flowers, the family requests that donations be made in Mike's memory to the American Radio Relay League or the Matthew Magine Jr. One Shot Foundation.
3 director positions on the Tucson Amateur Packet Radio Board of Directors are now open for nomination, and nominations may now be submitted. TAPR board members serve 3-year terms, and their responsibilities include attendance at both in-person board meetings each year. One is held at Hamvention in May, the other at the Digital Communications Conference in September. Regular participation in continuous board session, which is conducted over the internet. Active engagement in TAPR's management. To place a person in nomination, please remember that he or she must be a member of TAPR. Also, confirm that the individual is willing to have his or her name placed in nomination. By September 21st, 2024, send that person's name or your own if you wish to nominate yourself, call sign, mailing address, email address, phone number, and biographical sketch, 250 words maximum, via contact at tapr.org or via snail mail to TAPR, 1 Glen Avenue, Walcott, Connecticut, 06716. An online election will be held October 6, 2024 to October 19th, 2024.
Celebrating 25 years of providing the amateur radio community with the latest ham radio news and information, you are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio.
Bruce Page, KK5DO, is here now with this week's AMSAT report. Bruce?
Thanks, John. The AMSAT Board of Directors elections are over. Those elected to a 2-year seat on the board are Mark Hammond, N8MH, Paul Stutzer, N8HM, and myself, Bruce Page, KK5DO. Those elected to a 1-year alternate term are Douglas Tabor, N6UA, and Frank Karnauskas, N1UW. They joined Barry Baines, WD4ASW, Jerry Buxton, N0JY, Drew Glassbrenner, KO4MA, and Zach Metzinger, N0ZGO, to make up this year's AMSAT Board of Directors. This week I thought I would recognize a few accomplishments. AMSAT sponsors the Reverse VUCC, or VUCC-R Award, for working from 100 different grids on satellite. We recently issued award number 17 to Letitia, LU5ILA. We also sponsor the Gridmaster Award for working all the grids in the continental United States. Ryan, KI7QEK, earned award number 71. Congratulations to both. These awards are not easy to earn. This is Bruce Page, KK5DO. Back to you, John.
And thanks, Bruce, for that report.
It is time once again for this week's solar forecast. This is brought to us each week by solar prognosticator Tad Cook, K7RA in Seattle, Washington. Solar activity was quiet over the past week, but geomagnetic numbers were way up. The average daily sunspot numbers dropped from 178.4 to 120, and average daily solar flux from 223.7 to 175.7. The average daily planetary A index skyrocketed from 7.9 to 35.7, and middle latitude numbers from 11.1 to 23.4. 6 new sunspot groups emerged over the past week, 1 each on September 13th and 14th, 2 on September 16th, and 2 each on September 17th and 18th. Looking ahead at the predicted solar flux for the near term, it will be 155 on September 21st, 158 on September 22nd through the 23rd, 150 and 153 on September 24th and 25th. Then a huge leap to 235, 230 and 225 on September 26th through the 28th. And 240 on September 29th through October 2nd. Now looking at the predicted planetary A index for the near term, it will be 8 on September 22nd, 5 on September 23rd through the 25th, 25 on September 26th through the 27th, 15 and 10 on September 28th and 29th. And hold steady at 5 for September 30th through October 4th.
In Radio Sport this week, September 19th through the 20th, it's the Walk for the Bacon QRP contest, CW there. On September 19th, a couple of good contests, the NAQCC CW Sprint, that is CW, and the NTC QSO Party, that is CW as well. September 20th, the AGB Namiga contest, CW Phone and Digital. September 21st and 22nd, the ARRL EME contest, CW Phone and Digital. And on September 21st to the 23rd as well, the ARRL 10 GHz and up contest, CW Phone and Digital. Remember to visit the ARRL contest calendar for more events and information. The Fall 2024 Classic Exchange CX event will take place October 13th to the 16th, 1300 Zulu to 0700 Zulu for phone contacts. And CW contact days are October 20th through the 23rd from 1300 Zulu to 0700 Zulu as well. The CX is a twice-yearly operating event organized as a contest, but it is a low-pressure activity, with many rag chews and mostly talk about equipment of the past, vacuum tube radios. Amateur radio operators will be reminded what it was like to tune the older radios and offers collectors of these memorable rigs an opportunity to use and enjoy them. Additionally, it gives owners of modern equipment an opportunity to hear how these old rigs sound on the air. CX began 50 years ago when Stu Stevens, K8SJ, who's now a Silent Key, his brother Al, and Bob Morgan, K8RBV, were waxing nostalgic about their early 50s gear. Current CX organizers are Ron Pollock, N2RP, and Mark Bell, K3MSB. All rules and information can be found about CX at their website, Classic Exchange website. Upcoming Section State and Division conventions on September 20th through the 22nd. It's the Duke City Hamfest, sponsoring the ARRL New Mexico State Convention. That's in Albuquerque, New Mexico. September 21st and the 22nd, the Midwest Superfest, sponsoring the ARRL Illinois Section Convention in Chillicothe, Illinois. And on September 28th, it's the Red River Radio Amateurs Hamfest, sponsoring the ARRL Dakota Division Convention. That's in West Fargo, North Dakota.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. The other day I was handed a sheaf of paper. The person handing it to me, an amateur, was insistent that I take custody of this little collection. I asked what it was that they intended for me to do with it, and the response was that because I did things with history, I should do this too. Aside from taking on a new project, trying to juggle life and income, their observation was pretty spot on, even though I had never quite seen it that way. Over the years, I've often explained things in the context of the era in which it came into being. The first transatlantic telegraph cable in 1858, the first 20-metre contact between the UK and Australia back in 1925, the founding of the IARU, also in 1925. For some years I've been playing with the idea of documenting the journey from spark gap to SDR. I started writing down milestones, collecting information about the various protagonists along the way, attempting to capture their life milestones and their radio-related accomplishments. One friend went so far as to take photos of the replica spark gap transmitter in Hobart, Tasmania, as used by Douglas Mawson between 1911 and 1914 during their Antarctic expedition. Between being entrusted with the written history of the 28th chapter of the 1010 International Net and today, I've started a spreadsheet. If you know me at all, you know that I love a good spreadsheet. This one is pretty simple. Date, event type, protagonist, note, and source. So far I've got about 85 rows. I'm using it to capture milestones directly related to our hobby. When the first Echolink node went live, when RTTY came to be used on air, the invention of FM, when we got access to the 2-meter band, when 160 meters was taken away during World War II. Ultimately, all of it. There's already a website that documents some of this, but it's USA-centric, even though our community is global, and it does not include any sources, so there's no way to verify any of the events, which I think is essential if you're going to capture this in any meaningful way. I want this list I'm creating to include all manner of amateur-related things. The first time F-Troop went on air, the first CQ worldwide, perhaps even every CQ worldwide. I've also set up a form so you can contribute your events and over time grow it into something that captures what it is that we've done over the years. Perhaps it will grow into a section on Wikipedia. Perhaps it will become its own thing. It's too early to tell. As I've said many times, if you didn't write it down, it didn't happen. So this is me, or us, writing it down. Perhaps we'll be able to find a way to make it through the next 100 years. You can find the Amateur History Project under Projects on my homepage at vk6flab.com. I look forward to reading your contributions. So thank you, Christine, Victor Kilo 6 Zulu Lima Zulu, for pushing that sheaf of paper into my hands. I hope I'm worthy of the history that it represents. I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6 Foxtrot Lima Alpha Bravo.
In many parts of the world, school is back in session and regular lessons have resumed. Even before regular classes began, however, 21 teenagers in British Columbia, Canada were already entrenched in some pretty important work. Adam VE7ZAL and John VE7TI believe that their recent course on radio frequencies and electronics may well be unprecedented for secondary school students in Canada. That was what John wrote in the September and October issue of The Communicator, the magazine of Surrey Amateur Radio Communications. John and Adam, a robotics teacher at Kwantland Park Secondary School in Surrey, British Columbia, teamed up to help nearly 24 13 through 17-year-olds get a better grasp on the principles behind amateur radio and pass the gift of radio on to this next generation. By the time the course concluded, the students were able to sit the exam for the Canadian Amateur Radio Certificate. John wrote that Adam had proposed the idea for the course earlier in the year, and that while the instruction progressed, the students' enthusiasm grew gradually with each session. He wrote, "Throughout the course, we witnessed students experiencing significant revelations about the pervasive role of radio in our daily lives. Parks on the air, satellite communications, and high-altitude balloons were literally among the high points of the lessons. When the sessions ended, the tradition of a Thursday night get-on-the-air net kept the momentum going for the graduates. John and Adam hope to repeat the course next year."
We pause for stations along the network to identify. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, available as a direct download on our website at www.twiar.net.
In an announcement to the amateur radio community of Canada, Phil A. McBride, VA3QR/HP3QR, Radio Amateurs of Canada President and Chairman, has submitted his resignation. Mr. McBride said in a release that it's with mixed feelings that I announce my resignation as the President of the Radio Amateurs of Canada, effective November 1. While leading Canada's national organization has been the pinnacle of my time as a radio amateur, my family has moved full-time to Panama, and I've secured operating privileges as well as the call sign HP3QR. There is a Parks on the Air entity about an hour from our house that's never been activated, and I plan to fix that. I also plan to become involved with the community's educational program and show youth in my area the wonders of amateur radio. I would like to thank Radio Amateurs of Canada Board, executive, and volunteers for their support during my time as president and previously as regional director. I would also like to thank you, the membership, for your support you have given and continue to give to Radio Amateurs of Canada.
The Radio Club of America has announced both its annual award recipients and its incoming class of 2024 fellows. Through these awards, RCA has recognized individuals for their contributions to the wireless communications industry since 1935. This year, 13 awards will be presented, while 8 RCA members will be elevated to fellow status. The recipients and fellows will be honored at the 2024 RCA Awards Banquet at Westin Times Square in New York City on November 23rd. Founded in 1909, the Radio Club of America is a non-profit organization of wireless communications professionals. According to the club, its award winners are those who have dedicated significant time and talent toward the advancement of the wireless industry. Nominations are accepted from anyone in the field. Past award recipients include Edwin Armstrong, Martin Cooper, Jay Kitchen, and Fred Link, among others. A sampling of this year's winners are Tucker Dunham, KD2JPM, received the Carol Perry Young Professional Award. This award was established to honor a young professional who was part of the RCA Youth Activities program and has gone on to a career in wireless science. Dunham won RCA's Young Achiever Award in 2018 and is currently studying microelectronic engineering at the Rochester Institute of Technology with advancements in amateur radio digipeters for emergency applications to his credit. Dr. Nathan Cohen, W1YW, received the Dr. Arno Penzias Award for contributions to basic research in the radio sciences. This award recognizes significant contributions to basic research involving RF and related subjects to inspire future generations of scientific professionals. Dr. Cohen is a physicist, radio astronomer, and CEO of Fractal Antenna Systems, known for pioneering fractal antennas and metamaterials with over 100 technical papers, 93 patents, and numerous accolades to his credit, including the RCA DeForest and Grebe Awards. Dr. James Brakall, WA3FET, received the Dr. Ulrich Rode Award for Innovation in Applied Radio Science and Engineering. This award recognizes significant contributions to innovation in applied radio science and engineering in the wireless industry to inspire future generations of wireless professionals. Dr. Brakall is a professor emeritus of electrical engineering at Penn State, renowned for his work in numerical electromagnetics and antenna design, including contributions to the Numerical Electromagnetics Code, the HAARP facility, and the popular Skyhawk Yagi antenna. He has more than 45 years of experience and is distinguished as an RCA Life Fellow. Stanley Rubenstein, WA6RNU, received the Edgar F. Johnson Pioneer Citation. This award recognizes longtime RCA members who have either made noteworthy contributions to the success of the club or to the radio industry. Rubenstein is a retired manufacturer's representative and former president of RCA with a career spanning sales, marketing, and leadership roles in the communications industry. He is recognized with numerous awards, including the Barry Goldwater Award and the E.F. Johnson Award. See the complete list of 2024 RCA Award winners on their web page.
Nokia and Axiom Space have announced a partnership to integrate advanced 4G LTE communications capabilities into the next generation of spacesuits that will be used for the Artemis III lunar mission. Axiom Space's spacesuits will provide astronauts with advanced capabilities while providing NASA with commercially developed human systems needed to access, live, and work on and around the moon. Nokia, meanwhile, plans to deploy the first cellular network on the moon as part of the Initiative Machine's IM-2 mission, which is scheduled to be delivered to the launch site in 2024.
According to Inside Radio, the Federal Communications Commission said Friday that 5 stations, 4 FMs and an AM, were out of service in Louisiana as the state works to clean up after Hurricane Francine. The FCC is still collecting disaster information from 24 Louisiana parishes, although it has deactivated the Disaster Information Reporting System for all Mississippi counties. The FCC says in its update that as of Friday morning, the FMs that were dark were 3 bio-radio group stations in the Houma-Thibodeau area, including classic rock 97.7 KDLC, country KCIL 96.7, and adult R&B KJIN 1490, along with the Houma, Louisiana licensed translator K284CU at 104.7 FM that relays KJIN. And in the New Orleans metro area, the FCC says Southwest Broadcasting's Hot AC Lake 94.7 WYLK, Lacombe, Louisiana, was also off the air. DIRS reporting is a snapshot in time, however, and some or all of those stations may have since gotten back on the air. The FCC said Friday no television stations were off the air. It also reported that just 1.6% of cell sites were offline, an improvement over 11.7% being dark on Thursday. Cable and wireline companies reported 72,939 subscribers out of service in the disaster area, which includes the loss of telephone, television, and internet services.
The ARRL Foundation Club Grant Program is in the review phase as of this publication. With 110 grant applications received, the Grant Review Committee has their work cut out for them. Each grant will be reviewed and evaluated following the guidelines specified in the application. With $500,000 in grant funds to award, the process is a daunting task. Grants are expected to be awarded in November. The scope of the projects that have been funded in the past range from antennas for schools to elaborate station building programs. The major factor in determining which program is funded has been described as finding transformational projects, those with the most impact on the amateur community and the community as a whole. Stay tuned for additional information on this round of applications.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
Nine Entertainment blocked up to 99 million web requests from bots and potentially malicious traffic during this year's Paris Olympics. The media organization's Fastly web application firewall filters 1.2 billion daily web and application requests, including on its brands the Australian Financial Review and 9 News. However, during the Olympics, this daily number of requests increased fourfold, with some peaks even higher on days such as swimming, Nine Technology Director of Publishing and Enterprise Practices Andre Lockman said. Andre also touched on Nine's challenges with preventing artificial intelligence bots from lifting its brand's content. This is especially important for Nine's subscription-based brands like the AFR, The Age, and Sydney Morning Herald. AI services are increasingly able to summarize that content for these brands, so we're taking a more strict stance, Lockman said. We just updated our robots.txt to be able to enable blocking. Beyond that, it's about scraping at a rate-limiting level, but there's challenges in being able to do it at a more granular level.
There's time to plan participation in this year's Amplitude Modulation International, or AMI Jamboree 2024, starting at dusk November 29th and ending at dawn on December 1st. John Ross, KD8 IDJ, is here with the details.
The event is open to all amateur radio operators who have equipment to operate on the designated amateur AM bands. John McGarth, N9AMI Executive Director, said the Jamboree is not a contest. I like to call this an AM rally or an AM operating event, promoting the use of AM, camaraderie, and friendship. In the late 1980s, the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, proposed new rules that would effectively lower the legal limit output power of homebrew and commercially manufactured amateur radio transmitters. The FCC adopted the new rules but added a 10-year grandfathered clause to allow AM stations to continue operating in high power until the new power limit took effect. Dale Gagnon, KW1I, one of AMI's founders, said the good news that came out of this change was a strong FCC statement in support of AM's continuing importance in amateur radio in the United States. I'm John Ross, KD8I-DJ.
There are 4 categories for operation. Any rig or transmitter receiver combo may be used except for broadcast transmitters, which have their own category. All information about operating power, bands, and certificates is available at the AMI website.
The ARRL, the National Association for Amateur Radio, filed comments with the Federal Communications Commission urging that the 902 through 928 MHz amateur radio band be protected. ARRL joins hundreds of licensed radio amateurs who utilize the band in opposing a proposal from NextNav Incorporated, a licensee in the 900 MHz location and monitoring service, or LMS, to completely refigure the 902 through 928 MHz band and replace the LMS with high-powered 5G cellular and related location services. ARRL's comments, filed by our Washington, D.C. Council on behalf of ARRL members and radio amateurs, point out several problems with NextNav's request. Contrary to NextNav's assertions, the band is extremely crowded with millions of devices and transmitters in operation in multiple services, including the amateur service. Adoption of the proposal would result in either massive interference that would prevent proper operation or displacement to other bands. The difficulty is that there are no other bands known to be available, and in fact some of the amateur operations in this band are here because they were displaced when a portion of the 420 through 450 MHz band north of Line A was closed to the amateur service some years ago. Others were displaced from the same band when the new federal government defense radars were initiated, and continued amateur secondary operations would have interfered with their operation. Pushing amateur radio out of heavily used spectrum is a risk to public service, ARRL argues in the comments. When space can be found in this band, amateurs employ it to establish wide area voice and some television signal repeaters. Others are actively experimenting with digital mesh networks and associated control links. These networks are a testbed for digital design and experimentation, but are also available and used for backup emergency communications purposes. Still others operate low-power beacons for propagation research. Weak signal work, tuning, and experimenting to communicate over the longest paths with the least power also is popular and leads to improvements in equipment. Mesh networks are becoming increasingly used in emergency communications. Just this past week, the ARRL Utah section announced that dozens of amateur radio emergency service volunteers are working to expand the mesh network around the state. The needs of participating agencies have evolved to require more than analog voice and low-speed data modes, said ARRL Utah Section Public Information Coordinator Scott Rosenbusch, K7HSR. High-speed mesh networks use ARDEN, Amateur Radio Emergency Data Network software, will allow amateur radio to play a larger role in supporting these agencies in emergencies. The ARRL Utah section already has a 5-county mesh network in place. The proposal from NextNav makes it more difficult to operate networks like this one. Under NextNav's proposal, the much higher-powered transmitters would be ubiquitous and operating 24/7. The resulting interference would effectively exclude many of the amateur radio operations that are operating in the 902 through 928 MHz band. The FCC docket remains open for reply comments from the public until September 20th, 2024. As of September 6th, over 800 comments have been filed by amateurs and others who use this spectrum.
F. Brent Abbott, NA7D, Chief Revenue Officer of Rogue Space Systems, will keynote the AMSAT Space Symposium banquet to be held Saturday, October 26. Brent has been the Chief Revenue Officer at Rogue Space Systems, responsible for growth since July of 2022. Before Rogue, Brent stood up the nano-satellite manufacturer Nano Avionics U.S. office and factory as CEO and grew into U.S. business. Before joining Nano Avionics, Brent was the CEO and head of North American operations for AAC Clyde Space. Prior to that, he helped set up and held several senior roles at Surrey Satellite Technologies. He also started the hosted payload program at SST US, one of the world's first all-commercial hosted payload satellites, OTB-1. Prior to joining Surrey in 2008, Brent served as a business development manager at Honeywell Defense and Space and invented their miniature momentum control system using control moment gyros. His background also includes work as an engineer at Honeywell Commercial Aviation. Mr. Abbott is a registered professional engineer and graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree in Electrical Engineering from Iowa State University. Brent, NA7D, is also a member of AMSAT and has been an amateur radio operator since 1992. The 42nd Annual AMSAT Space Symposium, an annual general meeting, will be held on Friday through Saturday, October 25 and 26, at the Doubletree by Hilton Tampa Rocky Point waterfront in Tampa, Florida.
A new frontier in radio broadcasting called zonecasting is on the horizon. More than a few U.S. stations are using the technique. Zonecasting allows FM broadcasters to tailor programming and advertisements to different parts of their market using FM booster stations operating on the same channel as their primary signal. Theoretically, a station could simultaneously broadcast distinct commercials to varying neighborhoods or even buildings within its primary service area. Some broadcasters have raised concerns about potential interference and increased FM noise from multiple signals on the same channel. Despite assurances from proponents, skeptics argue that such a system could exacerbate existing challenges in maintaining signal quality. Currently, 3 minutes per hour is the maximum allowed per broadcaster in the U.S.
Serving the amateur radio community for a quarter century, you are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, heard around the world on the amateur bands and streaming on the Internet.
The FCC has adopted new rules with a report and order to allow FM broadcasters transmitting in digital format to use asymmetric sidebands without needing experimental authorization. This move is aimed at giving FM stations more flexibility in their digital operations, enhancing digital coverage while minimizing interference to adjacent analog channels. Historically, FM digital broadcasting has required symmetrical sidebands, meaning that the power levels on both the upper and lower digital sidebands were identical. Asymmetric sideband operation, now permitted, allows stations to adjust power levels independently on each sideband. This flexibility will allow stations to increase digital power in one direction to maximize coverage, while decreasing power in the other direction to protect adjacent analog stations from interference. The new rules will streamline the notification process for FM stations adopting this technology. This change is expected to lead to increased adoption of digital broadcasting among FM stations and enhance the reach and quality of digital radio. The rulemaking followed petitions from the National Association of Broadcasters, Xperi Corporation, and National Public Radio, who have long advocated for increased flexibility in FM digital broadcasting. The FCC acknowledged their studies, which demonstrated that many stations could operate at higher digital power levels on one sideband while protecting neighboring analog signals by reducing power on the other sideband. The FCC also noted that such operations have not led to significant interference in tests. The FCC's decision affects nearly all FM stations except for those operating on channel 300, 107.9 MHz, which still require experimental authorization for asymmetric sideband use due to concerns about interference with the aeronautical radio navigation spectrum. In addition to asymmetric sideband operation, the order introduces a new table that FM broadcasters can use to calculate maximum permissible digital power for each sideband. This step ensures that FM broadcasters can optimize their digital signal coverage while adhering to interference protection requirements. The new rules reflect the FCC's ongoing commitment to promoting digital radio adoption while balancing the need to protect traditional analog services. Commenters on the issue expressed support for the rule change, highlighting its potential to improve the quality and reach of digital radio signals. The changes to the rules will take effect 30 days after publication in the Federal Register, though stations may begin notifying the FCC of asymmetric operations immediately.
Jamboree on the Air, or JOTA, and Jamboree on the Internet, or JODI, is the world's largest digital scout event using amateur radio and the Internet. The event, to be held October 18th through the 20th, 2024, connects scouts worldwide for a full weekend of online activities that promote friendship and global citizenship. Millions of scouts participated, and during the 2014 event, worldwide scouting participation included 1.1 million Boy Scouts and 200,000 Girl Scouts, for a total participation of over 1.3 million, the largest scouting event in the world. Amateur radio operators use their stations to allow the scouts to make contacts. While many scouts are licensed radio operators, the majority participate in JOTA and JODI through stations operated by local radio clubs and individual radio amateurs. Some operators use television or computer-linked communications. Throughout the years, JOTA and JODI amateur radio stations have been set up in unusual locations, including the top of a mountain or on a boat. The event also features a variety of informal education activities, including webinars, global campfires, talent shows, live shows, fun challenges, and more through an interactive 3D campsite. More information about the upcoming Jamboree on the Air and Internet, including rules, regulations, call signs, and worldwide frequencies, can be found at Jamboree on the Air webpage. Additional information is available in the JOTA and JODI Ham Radio Handbook.
Hams in India played a crucial role in helping a man return home after more than 50 years. An abused child who was sold by his father and stepmother 52 years ago in India has been able to return home to the property he inherited from his late father in Odisha with the help of amateur radio. According to various media reports, the man, who is now in his 60s, was living in a state-run home whose administrators contacted the West Bengal Radio Club. The West Bengal amateurs are contacted often by local authorities because of the ham's wide network of contacts. The news report said that more than 5 decades ago, the man's family had taken him to Delhi and sold him when he was about 8 years old. There was no other information available about what happened to him after that or how he ended up living in a state home. Ambaris Nagbisva, VU2 JFA secretary of the radio club, told local media that the man's younger brother was unable to recognize him after so many years, but finally made positive identification after viewing the scars on the man's back that had been inflicted by years of childhood beatings. The news report said that initially the younger brother did not want his sibling returned because he would have had to share the inheritance of the property with him. The Hams intervened and secured support from the district magistrate and other authorities on the matter. The elder brother was returned home, and district administrators are taking measures to provide him with his inheritance.
Outside the United States, users of DAB Plus technology will be seeing some improvements in the delivery of emergency alerts. The delivery of improved emergency alerts and communications is expected next year for users of the newest DAB Plus receivers, which are in wide use in Australia and many parts of Europe and Asia. According to a report on Radio World website, the radios will be able to respond instantly for emergency transmissions, switching the receiver to the station transmitting the details and displaying text information on the screen. The technology also enables temporary radio channels to be established for the delivery of information. The standard is known as Automatic Safety Alert, or ASA. And ASA-equipped receivers are also capable of being turned on automatically to receive these emergency messages. The technology was developed by World DAB in partnership with Digital Radio Deutschland, working with the chipmaker Frontier Smart Technologies. The initiative went forward with manufacturers such as JVC, Kenwood, and Technisat on board. DAB Plus radio is not in use in the United States, but proved especially useful in Australia in 2011 during the floods that overtook Brisbane, Queensland. The deadly flooding killed dozens of people, forced massive evacuations, and ultimately cost $2.38 billion, according to the Insurance Council of Australia.
Hams operating portable from summits and parks in the United Kingdom may find it easier to announce their activations on the various spotting networks with the help of a shared rural network being created by all of the UK's cellular providers. Absence of 4G coverage in rural areas has been a stumbling block for cellular communications in those underserved areas. An agreement was signed in 2020 between Ofcom and the 4 cellular service providers to fill that need. The regulator announced recently that Vodafone, O2, and EE have fulfilled their commitment to bring 4G coverage to 88% of the UK's landmass by this past June, but that the 4th cellular provider, 3, did not meet that deadline. Ofcom said that 3 believes that it has met its commitment as of August 22nd. The deadline for the network's completion is the end of January 2027.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
And finally this week, here is something you can possibly spot the next time you are stargazing. NASA's ACS-3 Advanced Composite Solar Sail System is currently fully deployed in low Earth orbit, and stargazers can spot it if they know what to look for. It's actually one of the brightest things in the night sky, when the conditions are right anyway. What conditions are those? Well, orientation, mostly. ACS-3 is currently tumbling across the sky, while NASA takes measurements about how it acts and moves. Once that's done, the spacecraft will stabilize. For now, it means that visibility depends on the ACS's orientation relative to someone on the ground. At its brightest, it appears as bright as Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky. ACS-3 is part of NASA's analysis and testing of solar sail technology for use in future missions. Solar sails represent a way of using reflected photons from sunlight, but also possibly from a giant laser for propulsion. This perhaps doesn't have much in the way of raw energy compared to traditional thrusters, but offers low cost and high efficiency, not to mention considerably lower complexity and weight compared to propellant-based solutions. Solar sail technology aims to send a probe to Alpha Centauri within the next 20 years. Want to try to spot ACS-3 with your own eyes? There's a NASA app that can alert you to the sighting opportunities in your local time and region, and even guide you toward the right region of the sky to look.
This Week in Amateur Radio is holding open auditions for news anchors for the weekly national worldwide amateur radio news service. If you have a good radio voice and can reliably read provided news copy, we are looking for you. This, of course, is an all-volunteer position. An amateur radio license is not required. You must have a high-quality microphone, headset mics are not used, and be familiar with audio editing software to record and edit your finished news stories before uploading. If you would like to try out for a weekly or bi-weekly anchor position with North America's premier amateur radio news on air and podcast, please send an email to our producer, George, W2XBS. You can include a sample MP3 of yourself reading news copy sent as an attachment to W2XBS77@gmail.com. That's whiskey, the number 2, X-ray Bravo Sierra 77 @gmail.com. Be sure and use Anchor Audition in the subject line. Please include your phone number and a good window of time for a callback to discuss your submission and our operating logistics to see if This Week in Amateur Radio is a good fit for you. We hope to hear from you soon. This Week in Amateur Radio is heard around the country and around the world on great repeater systems like the CQ0 UTRZ repeater on 439.175 MHz in Sierra Aristal in Portugal, covering Porto to Lira. Many of the news and information items heard in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter, AMSAT, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the Shortwave Listening Post, the Federal Communications Commission, the Radio Society of Great Britain, and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the International Telecommunications Union, the 425DX News, Parks on the Air, and the Soda Reflector, and various news sources on the Internet.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you'd like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and our news team around the world, this is Chris Perrine, KB2FAF, wishing you a 73.